Welcome all to the Pro Football Radio Podcast. This is your co-host Jay Chima, with the pride and joy of Merrimack, New Hampshire, the Puma. Welcome in, brother man. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Jay. I kind of had to, unplug from the Super Bowl outcome for a little bit. This is really the first time talking football with anybody over the last, what is it, like 72 hours or so,
Mm-hmm.
after, factoring in like when the game ended. But no, it's great to be back and pretty much like the end of season podcast for, encapsulating the Super Bowl. And I know we got some thoughts on that and some thoughts on some
Mm-hmm.
off-season stuff. And,
Mm-hmm.
can't wait to do group therapy with you, Jay. But how are you
Oh,
doing?
dude, don't even ask, man. Don't ask. Like, you know how you've known me for a few years now. You're my best friend. We talk about this a lot. You know my quirks and my ticks, right? You know
Yeah.
that this time of the year I get very depressive because the sun is not outside, the football season's over. But this is the first time in a long time, actually for my whole life, that I'm glad the NFL season's over.
Oh,
With just how badly the AFC Championship game ended with the refereeing and how the Super Bowl itself was basically decided on a ticky tack call. For the first time ever, I am excited that I don't have to confront the NFL product for another 7 months. Like that's how badly the NFL broke me this year. You
wow.
know? Yeah, yeah. So with that being said, I'm sure you guys have already seen it. The Chiefs won in a nail biter, 38-35, in a game that was a great game, truthfully, for the longest of time. But the big deciding moment in that game was that flag for holding on Bradbury and Juju Smith, which basically decided the game. So, Chiefs won the game. Congrats to them. They've got their second in 4 years. They're on their way to being a dynasty, not a dynasty at the moment just yet, because I fairly believe that 3 Super Bowls in a span of 5 to 8 years is what's considered a dynasty. So two, they're on the cusp. So let them win another one, and they'll be a full-on dynasty. But off that Super Bowl win, Puma, what's your thoughts? What did you feel like was a deciding factor? Who impressed you the most? Just give me your general thoughts on the Super Bowl.
I mean, beside not counting and you hit it, the ticky tack rough, the holding call. I mean, sure, by the letter of the law, like, okay, it was holding. Bradbury even admitted it himself. But I feel like when it came to plays like that during the game, maybe it's just my own wishful thinking or, rose colored glasses. But I felt like the refs were letting them play
The
through
whole
the
game.
whistle a
The
lot,
whole game.
like short of whether or not it was a
Mhm.
catch or not, which, Nick Costos put out a great tweet on Twitter saying, who shot JFK? What happened at Roswell? What is a catch in the
Yeah.
NFL? And I think that was the big thing for the game. Up until that point, the only critique I had from this referee crew was what is a catch and what isn't a catch.
Yeah.
But to the X's and O's of what decided the game, the vaunted pass rush of the Philadelphia Eagles, for all intents and purposes, I know the offensive line was great, was really neutered. I know they got a couple of pressures up there. They had a couple of hits on Mahomes, but it was after he got the ball out of his hand pretty much. But he was never uncomfortable in the pocket, even
Hmm.
after he rolled his ankle up, which I thought that was about to be
Fake.
game, set, and match.
Fake.
But then you saw, some of the acting on the sideline, in my
He's
opinion.
a Mac Jones. He's like, ah, ah. At one point,
But
my nephew was like, "Did he grab the wrong ankle?"
I was waiting for him to get the Purple Heart in the Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, all intents and purposes, like maybe it was the field and a combination of the offensive line for the Chiefs being that good, but the defense, which I thought was going to be a big strength go for the Eagles going in this
Mhm.
game, was really
Did
negated,
not show up.
and
Did not
they
show
didn't
up.
show up.
But
And
we had this conversation before the Super Bowl, Puma, about how I truly believe that Eagles defense was a little overrated because we ran down the list of
yeah,
opponents they had this year, and there was no elite level quarterback they played this year. They played Dak Prescott, who hung a 40 on them. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers had some success on them, but this year, Aaron Rodgers isn't that elite number one quarterback, right? So, like, there was no Josh Allen, Burrow, or like, Mahomes on their schedule, and this came back to bite them in the ass. Like, you saw you saw a defense that had no idea what was going on. Like those two touchdowns that they ran the little like stick route and then back out with Kadarius Toney, and on the other side, I believe it was Sky Moore. It's
Yeah.
the same exact play, and both times that defense is left holding the bag. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, did you guys even show up at all?
Right. And it's funny because Jonathan Gannon, the defensive coordinator for the Eagles, just got a job as head coach
Oh my
for the
god.
Cardinals. But like all intents and purposes, like I'm not putting that on Gannon. I think that was more so like the player executing what the actual game plan was.
But what's your thoughts on the fact that they? Let me ask you this: did Patrick Mahomes make any tough throws in your mind? Because in my mind, there was a lot of soft coverage. Like
Hmm.
basically, the reason why Patrick Mahomes only threw for 180 yards and a lot of it was dinking and dunking, the fact that his biggest completion of the game was 14 yards, is because that Eagles defense was playing some of the softest coverage I've seen all year long. I was honestly shocked. I was like, why are they playing off and why aren't they pressing at the line?
Hmm. Well, isn't that kind of the motif? I mean, I know they like to play too high a lot throughout the season, so that might just be the defensive identity at that point. But I feel like they might have just been trying to dare the Chiefs to actually run the football, which
Which they did well,
which
153
they
yards.
did. I mean, Isaiah
Mhm.
Pacheco took the bait, and we said it last week. Like he's the hardest running back that I've seen. For frankly for the season. I mean, he really was trying to move, and even after he got popped by, I think it was Bradbury, he got lit up. He had to leave the game for a little bit. Um, I I'm not really putting that on Gannon. I think that was more so like the defensive identity of the team as a whole for the season, and plus just
Mhm.
really execution wise.
Yeah. Yeah, and on top of that, I think you saw the severe coaching disparity between Nick Sirianni and Andy Reid. And obviously we get it. Andy Reid, has been around for years on end now, and Nick Sirianni is a newer coach in the league. But you saw Andy Reid just ate his lunch. He did.
Mhm.
He simply ate his lunch. So, you know, congrats to the Chiefs, man. Everybody's going to be praising them. They deserve it. But in my opinion, Puma, I truly believe that Jalen Hurts outplayed Patrick Mahomes.
Oh,
The
I think
one
so.
thing that shocked me the most was the fact that Jalen Hurts A threw the ball really well and B ran the ball really well. Like some of these stats like that we have from the game are absolutely jarring. Like in total, Patrick Mahomes equated for about 220 yards of offense, 180 throwing, about 40 rushing, where Jalen Hurts was 304 yards passing and 70 yards rushing, which is close to 375 in total of total offense. And that was a shock to me that for some reason, Jalen Hurts was asked to do a lot more when the narrative was that team with the Eagles was just so much better than the Chiefs that it was going to be more of a well-rounded game by the whole team. In reality, Patrick Mahomes had to do a lot less. Like he's the one that relied on his team heavily to kind of like help him through the game. So I was super impressed with Jalen Hurts. I think the kid is on the rise. If I had to rank the quarterbacks right now, I was thinking about this earlier. Like it probably is going to be like Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson when he's healthy and right. Uh, at that point, maybe Jalen Hurts. Like I was thinking Trevor Lawrence or Justin
Oh,
Herbert. I'm
above
kind of,
Herbie.
well, I mean, I'm out on Herbie, man. What you
True.
see out of Jalen Hurts is pure heart. Jalen Hurts is made up of the right things. Where in 10 years from now, Puma, he will be a much better quarterback than Herbert. I already believe that he is. I mean, the way he was throwing the football, like I get it. It's not a rocket arm, but like what he's made up with his intangibles is just stunning to me. So I would put him in that 6-7 range right now. And if he keeps on this trajectory next year and gets better and better, I mean, who knows? He might start cracking the top 5 elite quarterback rankings.
Yeah. Everything you said about the coaching as well. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I was watching the game, obviously, and at times I was wondering, did like Boston Scott and Miles Sanders make the trip? Because I barely saw Miles Sanders on the field. And
Yeah.
Kenny Gainwell was getting a lot of run, and Boston
Mhm.
Scott I think he only got 8 yards in that whole game. So I was I know there have been games where Miles Sanders just seems to disappear. I did not have that, during the Super Bowl on my bingo card. I did not think the whole running game was going to be predicated on Jalen Hurts that night.
Yeah, it was kind of shocking to see that Jalen Hurts had 70 yards of rushing, Gainwell 21, Miles Sanders 16, and Boston Scott 8. So basically, the majority, 65% of the rushing attack came from Jalen Hurts. Where on the flip side, Isaiah Pacheco had 76 rushing yards out of the total 158. Jeremy Kinnan had 34, and then Patrick Holmes had 40. So, it was jarring to me because I thought going into this game, the Philadelphia Eagles were going to be able to do whatever they wanted. And they did for the most part, but when it mattered the most, it seems like that's when the inexperience or the coaching lack or whatever it was kind of really showed through for those guys.
Now, I know this is probably a little bit off script, but where do you see like these teams moving forward, like next year in the way too early predictions? Like, maybe that's a segue, but I mean,
Good,
to wrap
Puma.
this
Good
up,
segue. Very
to wrap
nice.
this up, you know what I mean? Like to take your chair for a minute.
I
Where do
like
you
it.
see the Eagles and the Chiefs, moving forward?
Well, so back-to-back Super Bowl titles are a hard and tricky thing to do in the NFL. We know, the last time it happened was 03-04 with the Patriots, and it's one of the hardest things to do in all of sports. So if I'm just using that logic, then by that logic, the Chiefs will not be there in the Super Bowl next year. If I had to guess right now, I think the Eagles will probably make the NFC Championship game, probably against the 49ers again. And then on the AFC Championship side, I think it'll probably be Chiefs versus Bills. I'm still like, put it this way. I was between Bills or the Bengals taking on the Chiefs in the what you call it AFC Championship game, and I just thought that I'm gonna give the Bills one more try, man, just because I know those guys are so close and like on the edge. So if I had to pick right now, give me Bills versus 49ers in the Super Bowl. But then again, we'll fine tune those predictions as the year goes on.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I think the NFC is so weak compared to the Hell in a Cell that is known as the AFC. I think the Eagles are definitely going to be back in the dance. I think they're going to be in the NFC Championship game. And I also co-sign with the 49ers being in there. I just think the Eagles are going to go back to the dance. I think they'll be in the Super
Really?
Bowl. So I'm looking at a Eagles Bills matchup as well too. And for all intents and purposes, like this is the last dance for the Buffalo Bills, in my opinion. Like
Mm-hmm.
if they don't punch through next season, like now you're going to start seeing that team get dismantled a little bit just because of the cap situation that they're going to be up against. And, is that coaching staff still going to be there if they have let's call it, for what it is, an abject failure like they had this season? So I think if they don't push through that, they don't get off that plateau and they get to the Super Bowl and ultimately win a championship, then I think there's going to be potentially some changes coming in Orchard Park. But give me the Eagles going back to the dance. Just the NFC is just so weak, and who knows?
Yeah.
Like I know Brock Purdy was a great story, but like is Lightning going to strike twice again next year
No,
with him? Like who
probably
knows?
not. Yeah, and you're spot on right with the Bills side of that house, man, because I do believe the Bills are probably a losing streak away from imploding. I mean, you started seeing some of
Mm-hmm.
the cracks in the foundation this year in the playoff game against the Bengals, where Stephon Diggs is holding his hands up to Josh Allen, and a lot of excuse making came out of those exit interviews with the GM and the coaching staff. So, I think that team next year has to start off hot with the Buffalo Bills, and they've got to ride it through, man. And it's just sad because we're both Bills fans at this point. We both like Josh Allen, but the difference in level of play between Josh Allen and not even Mahomes, but even Burrow at this point is vast. Like you're starting to see, as great as Josh Allen is with his arm, like his turnovers are still some of the just some of the most dumbest plays I've ever seen. So we're hoping he can correct that. Now, if we had to open this up besides the usuals, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
Chargers and Justin Herbert, and if Lamar Jackson is happy and he's playing well with the new offensive coordinator and Todd Monken, we'll hit on Lamar Jackson later on. Do you see anybody else besides the big, 4-5 making it out there? Do you see a dark horse? Is there a Philadelphia-esque team this year? Because I know we all had Philadelphia doing well this year, but nobody thought they were going to go to the Super Bowl. Nobody thought Jalen Hurts was going to take this team to the Super Bowl, right? So is there a dark horse team out there in your mind that is kind of just right there at the heels trying to make it to that spot?
I'm gonna go down to Duval County. I'm gonna go to Jacksonville,
Oh,
man.
nice,
I'm gonna
nice.
go there because I feel like that was a very young roster, and I think they're going to figure out a way to get Evan Ingram back there. And he looked every part, throughout the season as the guy that the Giants took out of Ole Miss in the first round years ago in the draft. So, and Trevor Lawrence got those, that playoff experience. He shook off the 4 interceptions and he led that massive comeback against the Chargers. And the division is weak as hell in the AFC South. And I'm saying that knowing that it's probably going to be Tannehill back there at quarterback again. And you have Mike Vrabel and Derrick Henry on his last leg. But I mean, I'll take my chances with, Jacksonville making some noise again and possibly going for a deep playoff run. Like, I think they're going to win the AFC South. And would I be shocked if they maybe moved it past the division round? Not at all. And I think if that's the case, all bets are off. I think they could be the ultimate, underdog story in the AFC that could make a deep playoff run.
How about this for a surprise? Mac Jones and the Patriots in the Super Bowl. I'm kidding. I just said to get triggered. I'm not that stupid. But how about, let's think outside the box here, right? What about the Detroit Lions? What about the Detroit Lions?
I mean,
what's your thoughts on that?
they would have been in the playoffs. Like if Seattle, let me put it this way. If Baker Mayfield did not have that boneheaded play and threw the interception in overtime, Detroit's in the playoffs, and who knows what would have happened with the grit from Dan Campbell's team. But no, I don't think that's a bridge too far. Right. I think that is fantastic.
I don't think our nation is ready for a Detroit Lions Super Bowl.
Can you imagine Lions Bills?
Oh my God, we don't have the infrastructure for that. We do not have the infrastructure for that. Okay, let's think a little bit more outside the box. Let's say Sean Payton can somehow turn around Russell Wilson, right? Let's walk with me here, right?
Okay.
So before Sean Payton got hired on with the New Orleans Saints, the New Orleans Saints were the New Orleans Aints, right?
Yep.
And year 1 with the Saints, he was what, in the NFC Championship game? Is that correct? Do I have that correct?
Year 1, that was year 2 or 3.
Okay.
Year 1 was like kind of rebuilding after Katrina. They were actually playing at home for the first time that season.
So let's assume that this Denver Broncos roster is way better than the roster he took over in New Orleans. Correct? I mean, we can all agree on that. And let's say he can fix Russell Wilson. Now that's a big if, right? Obviously, that's the big caveat here. If he can fix Russell Wilson. But I'm not gonna lie to you, Puma. The more I look at that roster and with Sean Payton's offense, I really do think they can give the Kansas City Chiefs a run for their money. Like, and obviously this is a big caveat with Russell Wilson playing well. This is Russell Wilson going back to Legion of Boom Seattle days. If that's the case, man.
Well, then if that's the case, he's just going to be along for the ride.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he still made his plays. He still rolled out. He still started running downfield. And let's be real. The last 4 games of the season this year, he started coming alive a little bit. He threw 10 touchdowns. I believe it was 0 interceptions in the last 4 games. And he had the Chiefs on the ropes until he got his concussion. So I'm just saying, if we really want to get nuts, how about the Denver Broncos?
I mean, that's the hope, right? Like, that's the hope for the Walton family. Like, they just gave Sean Payton the keys to the car. But you know what's going to happen is, like, if this doesn't work out, like, George Payton is somehow going to be out of a job and Sean Payton's just going to take over all player personnel decisions.
Well, wasn't George Payton on the Russell Wilson trade?
He was.
So I think if this doesn't work out, I do think he should probably lose his job. I mean, it sucks to say that, you never call for somebody's job, but I think
feel like the previous ownership group was in on that as well too. But I mean, the Waltons don't care. Like, that wasn't their deal, and they signed this guy to a contract without even seeing him play. So like, all that being said, like, his previous draft hits that he's had, like, that's going to be null and void if they don't make noise in the playoffs for sure. I don't think it's a bridge too far. That defense is great, even when they,
Mm-hmm.
they traded away Bradley Chubb. It's just going to come down to, can those guys stay healthy? Because I know that they were kind of the walking wounded at times during the season, and a couple of major injuries, with some ACL tears and whatnot. But I think they could definitely make some noise, and they could potentially be like the no-fly zone 2.0 that the Broncos were in the 2015 run that they had against when they played in the Super Bowl against the Panthers, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think they could do that for sure.
Yeah.
What's another? Let's get nuts.
The
Another
Jets
get
with the
nuts.
Jets with Aaron Rodgers, obviously. That's a big one.
Well, now is it going to be A-Rod, or are we going to have a different quarterback going up there? Like, who knows? I'm assuming it's going to be Rodgers when he comes
Yeah.
out of his ayahuasca dark cave, retreat that I think he is starting today, because he did a
Yeah.
hit for a Pat McAfee show today, and it didn't look like he came out of a bunker or anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, he said
So
he pushed it off till towards the end of this week because he wanted to go on Pat McAfee show. Surprise, surprise.
Anywho, if he
Yeah.
doesn't come out of that cave, if that thing doesn't open up, I'm not going to miss him at all. I just wonder if he's going to be doing like press communiques, like, early 2000s type of deal coming from a
Yeah.
cave. Anywho, no, I think if Rodgers is in there, sure, the Jets have a puncher's chance. That defense is elite as well too, and that playmaker and the pass catching guys take a massive bump up there. It's just going to come down to, in my opinion, like, how is Nathaniel Hackett going to actually
Mm-hmm.
call offensive plays?
Yep.
Because I mean, he wasn't really that great when he was calling plays in previous stops, and when he was
Mm-hmm.
with the Packers, he was just the quarterback coach for his boy A-Rod. So now it's like, well, do we have Mike LaFleur like 2.0 back there, or are we going to get like a Mike McDaniel, Brian Daboll type of offensive mind all of a sudden out of Nathaniel Hackett?
Yeah. All right. So let's think about somebody else here. Where do you fall on the Tennessee Titans? What are they doing? Are they just basically done at this
Well,
point? It seems
I
like
mean,
they've gotten a quarterback. It seems like the roster's falling apart. It seems like offensive line might not be that great next year. I think Mike Vrabel's in for some lean years, man.
I think he's in for some lean years too. And he pretty much ran the general manager out of that building after the Eagles, curb stomping, where AJ
Mm-hmm.
Brown, I think, went off for like 3 touchdowns. But no, I mean, Treylon Burke, considering the concussion, and he had a couple of, like, I think he had a hamstring injury early in the year. He showed promise as a potential like replacement for AJ Brown.
Yeah.
But we have come to, in my opinion, we have come to the end of the Derek Henry, King Henry train. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the tread on the tires is showing, and the offensive line is not making anything easier for them. And, you don't have that dynamic threat on the outside that you have with AJ Brown. So, like, you can't really live off of the play action. So, unless Treylon Burks is going to take that massive step forward in year 2, it's going to be some pretty lean years for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I have Jacksonville winning that division.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So one of the teams that is going to be squarely in the mix next year, if they have a quarterback, and that's going to be the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson. Reports came out over the weekend that obviously the Baltimore Ravens are going to franchise tag him. And the thing that caught my eye in the Ian Rappaport report was basically, the Baltimore Ravens could be swayed into trading Lamar Jackson with a lucrative deal, right? A lucrative package. So that's the first time, in my opinion, that anybody has floated the idea of trading Lamar. And I believe, Ian Rappaport is the NFL media reporter, so he gets a lot of inside information and funnels through him. I believe this is massive because this is the first time somebody's acknowledged, probably from within the Baltimore Ravens organization, that they are willing to move on for him. What's your thoughts on that report? And do you believe, obviously it'll take a lot to move off of Lamar Jackson, but what do you think the report's coming from? And do you buy it?
Oh, that's coming from ownership. That's coming from Biscotti and or Biscotti, because Biscotti's a cookie. But
Good
yeah,
cookie
that's coming
too.
from. It is a good cookie, but no, it's definitely coming from the ownership box, especially when you think about 2 or 3 weeks ago where John Harbaugh couldn't shut up about how Lamar is his guy and he expects Lamar to be back and they're going to work through the contract situation. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, we're going to tag him for sure. And if we get a Don Corleone, I'm getting an offer that I can't refuse type of deal for the trade assets, Lamar, thank you for your services. Best of luck with your future endeavors. So like that is Bisciotti essentially telling Lamar, because Lamar is his own agent or his mother acts as a quasi agent type of deal. That is Bisciotti saying like, there are going to be other avenues that we can explore, that we can look for the future of the team. And, I know the ownership group, will probably say like, oh, look what Brett Hundley did in relief. It was 3 games and somehow homeboy made a play, made the Pro Bowl. That's a different story. Unless they're just simply factoring in, or they're looking that far down the road to see like, what is the quarterback class going to be like for the next 3 years? And that's something you could probably speak more towards than me at this point. But, maybe they're just reading the room. They're looking at the AFC North and it's like, okay, like it's really Joe Burrow. It's us if Lamar's there. And is Kenny Pickett really the guy? And Deshaun Watson, like, is he, coming? Is he getting Le'Veon Bell here? And he missed a whole year. Is he really going to recapture like his glory days from the Houston Texans per se? Like maybe they're just looking at the room and saying, if we can hit in the draft, then we could probably compete with Joe Burrow. Maybe worst case, make a wild card spot. Maybe that's like the calculus that's factoring in their head. Ultimately, I think they're going to tag him. They're going to figure out a long-term deal because they don't want to lose Lamar as an asset, not just for winning, but just for bringing people in Baltimore to that stadium.
I believe they won't get a long-term deal done. I believe they're going to franchise tag him, try to squeeze one more year out of him. And I believe after this year, they're going to either move him or he might walk, which I doubt he'll walk, but they'll probably end up moving him for some trade assets. I think Bisciotti is looking around the NFL, and we had this conversation a couple of times now. Is Lamar Jackson going to beat Burrow, Allen's, Mahomes on a consistent basis? No, he's not. Simply put, he's not, right? He's not going to be able to outgun Joe Burrow alone in his division. When Deshaun Watson is healthy, engaged, and not funneling massage therapist, he's a much better quarterback than Lamar Jackson. So I think Bisciotti sees the landscape. He sees what his team can and can't do. I think we saw that in the Super Bowl with a quarterback in Jalen Hurts who's run first, lose to a quarterback that's just special throwing the football. And that's what it is. That's what it comes down to. Like, you've got to have a special throw of the football in the NFL. And as special as Lamar Jackson is, he's not that. So couple that with the fact that I think Bisciotti wants to send a message. I think I've had this conversation with you before about how Bisciotti, Jerry Jones, Robert Kraft, these seasoned veteran NFL owners, I think they're trying to take the league back. I think they're trying to corral this NFL quarterback market. Like what the Haslams did was like just spitting in Bisciotti's face, basically. And I think he's trying to set an example with Lamar Jackson. So couple all that with the hiring of Todd Monken. This is the one part that kind of doesn't fit into my narrative, is the fact they hired Todd Monken today and Lamar Jackson had input. Now, obviously, if you made your mind up about Lamar Jackson, you probably wouldn't ask for his input, right? You'd probably be like, whatever it is what it is. We'll just make it through for this year and then figure out next year. But that's where my little narrative falls apart, is the hiring of Todd Monken today with Lamar Jackson's input.
You actually just took my next point, right out my mouth, when I think Bisciotti is just trying to corral back the free agency market, because the Haslams completely torpedoed that with the fully guaranteed contract. And, you could look at the injury history per se, and his playoff performances, to be quite frank. I don't think they're going to justify giving this dude, a blank check essentially and guaranteed money. Todd Monken is definitely interesting. It was kind of funny because I honestly had Cliff Kingsbury going there ultimately to try to air out that offense. But it sounds like he came back from Thailand. He's been interviewing for some jobs. So
has he really?
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting.
He, I don't know if it was through Zoom with him drinking a Mai Tai on a beach in Bangkok, but or wherever, because I think Bangkok is a city
I
in the
hope,
middle of the country.
I hope for Cliff Kingsbury, for Cliff Kingsbury, that he took his girlfriend and wife with him to Thailand, because middle-aged man, Thailand,
Yeah,
you
there's some
know.
questions. A little bit. That's for PFR After Dark. But
I'm just saying, it looks a little weird. I'm just
yeah,
hoping he took his girlfriend with him.
yeah, you're laying it on pretty thick. But no, it's gonna be interesting. It's
I could make so many inappropriate jokes right now, but I won't.
we could definitely go that way to roll the dice.
Nope.
But Devin
This
Duvernay is going to be wide
is
receiver
a family
one for that
show.
team. Oh yeah, fun for all. Fun family show here.
Yeah.
But they're gonna have to figure out getting playmakers out there, because not counting Mark Andrews, like, it's Devin Duvernay at wide receiver. Like, that's your be all end all. So are they going to be in on the DeAndre Hopkins market to have him with Lamar? Like, maybe. I don't think that's a bridge too far, but now is that really going to help get Lamar a blank check pretty much, unless he's just going to, like you said, play out on the tag, see what they do this year. And if they make a deep run and he wins more than one playoff game, then he gets the long-term extension. I think a lot is going to be hinging on his performance this year, assuming he is not traded on the tag.
Well, I mean, I think DeAndre Hopkins, obviously is a viable option, but I don't think his skill sets match up with Lamar Jackson's skill sets. I truly believe Lamar needs pieces around him like a Julian Edelman used to be, right? Or Mark Andrews is obviously perfect for him. If I'm those guys in the Baltimore front office, I'm looking at that Gronk Hernandez tight end model and trying to mimic that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to find a way to, I know it's not going to happen, but try to go to Gronk and be like, listen, do you want to come back for a year, man? Like, do you want to catch some touchdown passes? Like, whatever you got to do to somehow mimic that, like, tight end duo that the Patriots had in the early like 11, 10, 12, 13. That's what you got to do. You got to complement his skill sets, and getting him a burner down the field, like, it's not going to do well for him.
Mm-hmm. But is DeAndre Hopkins even a burner down the field anymore?
He's not, but he's technically a guy that stretches the field, correct? Like, he's a guy that's outside the numbers. He's a deep to intermediate route runner. I would try to focus on somebody in the draft. Maybe if Hunter Renfrow can be shaken loose from the Ravens, Hunter Renfrow would be absolutely dynamite for Lamar Jackson. Speaking of the Raiders, reports came out today that Derek Carr has officially been released by the Las Vegas Raiders. Yep. Reports came out last week that he met with the New Orleans Saints. They had a good meeting, and a trade deal was being worked out between the Raiders and the Saints for his services. Obviously, Derek Carr has the no trade clause, so he has all the power in the situation, and he let it be known that he is not going to accept the trade to the New Orleans Saints. Thus, the Raiders were forced to release him today. So, with all that being said, where do you think Derek Carr plays next year?
Well, they were forced to release him because if they didn't release him today, they would be on the hook for $40 million guaranteed. Yep. But honestly, I think it's going to be an NFC South team. Now, whether or not it's the Saints or it's the Buccaneers, that's open to interpretation. Whether or not he goes to the Jets, if the New York Jets lose out on the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes, I think that's going to be the backup plan. But honestly, I think it's going to be somehow the Saints. Like, I think that might be the case. I think so. I think it might just be coming down to, he didn't really want to give the Raiders a solid. It's like, yeah, you can trade me here and you get draft assets. Like, no, you're gonna release me. I'm gonna potentially sign wherever I want. And not only that, Jay, like, because they released him today, they don't even get like a comp pick for this dude. So, like, the Raiders completely bungled this whole situation with how the contract was worked out. Like, 3 days after the Super Bowl, you have to find a trade candidate or you're going to be on the hook for $40 million guaranteed. So it was a squeeze play. It was inevitable that they were going to cut this man. So, like, if you're a team, why would you trade assets when you could potentially get this dude for pennies on the dollar and you keep your draft picks there? Because the Raiders were to lose. And now he went Bafangul to him, and they're not even going to get a comp pick for this guy. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be definitely an NFC South team. I think the Saints are ahead in the doghouse.
Yeah, Saints are a good spot for him. They've got a good core of offensive weapons: Valvin Kamara, Chris Olave. They've got a good defense. And the only thing I have a concern with is their head coach. I don't believe Dennis Allen is anything special. So, that's a good spot. But when you said NFC South, he would work really well with who? He would work really well with Frank Reich. I feel like with Frank Reich and Frank Reich is putting together a powerhouse staff in Carolina. This is one of the underrated storylines of the week so far because the Super Bowl is going on. But he just hired on, what was his name? Jim Caldwell. He basically got him out as an offensive assistant. He hired a great offensive mind, great defensive coordinator. So, I think Carolina is doing something special. I think they're obviously a couple of years away from competing, but I'll tell you what, if I'm Derek Carr and I want to resurrect my career, I go to Frank Reich. Like, listen, man, hey, man, I know we might not be great this year, but if you can, provide me with a 2 or 3 year guarantee, I'll give you everything I have. And I promise you, by the end of that 3 year stretch, I think Derek Carr would be a great quarterback, and that Panthers team will be awesome as well. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, obviously not, but it's a great spot for him.
Right. I feel like, Dave Tepper might have just accepted reality that they're going to have to get young and they're going to have to find their franchise quarterback because they've been burned so much with the Sam Darnold experience and Baker Mayfield. And, who knows if maybe Matt Corral might have been the guy if he didn't get hurt in training camp. They burned draft capital to get Will Grier, and that didn't work out. I just don't know if they're going to try to hitch their caboose to like another veteran quarterback. And I'm not saying he is the same as those two bozos. I think he's light years ahead of where those, Mayfield and Darnold are. But I feel like they're going to try to find their guy in the draft. Now that's not beyond the realm of they have the honest discussion with Derek and say, listen, we're taking a quarterback in the draft. We will sign you for like the veteran minimum type of deal on like a prove it deal. You'll be the guy for this season. This guy will sit behind you and learn the whole process of what being a quarterback in the NFL is. And the following season, we'll see where we're at type of deal. I don't think that's the bridge too far.
Well, this was quite the fall from grace, wasn't it? Like, wasn't Derek Carr the hometown hero basically for the Raiders?
He was an MVP candidate in the mid 2000s, so he broke his leg. Oh my God.
People loved him before the season started. People were talking about the Raiders being a Super Bowl contender, and you just saw it. You just saw he just didn't have it. Like, there's something about him where he kind of freaks out and just throws the ball into bad situations. Like, that's the best way I can paint Derek Carr in a nutshell. Is he has all potential in the world. He had all the weapons in the world. He had a great offensive mind, in my opinion, Josh McDaniels this year. And he just for some reason never got the system, and he just freaked out way too much. And it's funny what the preseason narrative was around the Raiders and Derek Carr, and now where we are now, him getting released a year into his new contract. It's quite the shift in what happened, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Life comes at you fast in the NFL.
It does. And who knows? Maybe Mark Davis might have been squeezed a little bit for cash. Maybe.
Yeah. Yikes. Yeah.
But that's the Derek Carr sweepstakes. Who would have thought you would have had Derek Carr and the word sweepstakes just mashed together?
I know, right? I know. Yeah, but I mean, I think you make a good point. It's probably going to end up being the Saints for all intents and purposes. And it probably, if the Jets are an outside contender, if obviously, Aaron Rodgers doesn't land with the Jets, then they got to figure out what they're going to do next year in quarterback. They can't go into the draft because they don't have 2 or 3 years to develop another guy on that roster. You can't go with Zach Wilson. So Derek Carr could be a backup for the Jets.
And it's another thing too, like, reading the landscape. If you're Derek Carr and you want to make it to the playoffs again, is the route going to be easier in the NFC or the AFC?
Yeah, you're right.
NFC team.
Yeah. So who
knows? Maybe he goes to Washington because they're going to be out on Wentz. Like, that was the report that came out. Hell, I think that came out Super Bowl Sunday in the morning. That it looks like they're going to find a way. They're going to part ways with Carson Wentz after they completely obliterated their cap this season, trading for him and assets. Taylor Heineke, I love Heineke, but he's not the guy. Howell showed promise, but again, it was one game at the end of the year. Is it beyond the realm that Derek Carr and Sam Howell compete? And if Derek Carr wins it out, like, okay, you have Derek Carr and possibly Eric Bieniemy, who's been linked heavily to that job as an offensive coordinator. And I think Greg Roman was interviewing either today or tomorrow for that job. I think it's going to tell where Washington's going to go. If they hire Greg Roman, I think they're going to try to look at the athleticism of Sam Howell. If they go the other route, maybe they look at Derek Carr possibly coming in on the cheap. Who knows? The NFC East, in my opinion, is not the NFC beast as some people like to claim it is. But that's just my two cents.
Let's get a little nuts, okay? Let's say Bill Belichick decides he's not sold on Mac Jones, okay? And he wants a veteran quarterback in camp to push Mac Jones. I think if I'm Derek Carr, I listen to Bill Belichick and see if I can go over there and try to resurrect my career. They got Bill O'Brien now, who obviously is a great offensive mind. They've got decent enough weapons on that roster. Like, I know everybody likes to show the Patriots weapons, and I get it. They're not elite. But Devontae Parker, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Ramondre Stevenson, there's a good nucleus of weapons there. And I truly believe that Bill Belichick is not sold on Mac Jones. He said it so many times that he's not going to go ahead and name him the starter over the whole year. So do you see a scenario where Derek Carr could end up in New England and potentially push Mac Jones?
Yeah, that, or he could just push the ball down the field as a starter on opening day. I don't think that's beyond the realm of possibility either. You get a bit on the cheap. You're playing under the guise of the wizened guy on the mountaintop and Bill Belichick. Like, no, I don't think that's a bridge too far to cross. I could definitely, but if he's going to like an AFC team that is not the New York Jets, I could see the New England Patriots being a potential landing spot. And I mean, I'm here for like the let's get nuts scenarios all the time anyways. Yeah. Can you imagine the narrative of Mac Jones lost out to Derek Carr?
Well, in my mind, Mac Jones at his best is Derek Carr. So why not just negate all that development and spending 2-3 years on trying to develop him to become Derek Carr and just go and get Derek Carr? I mean, does that make too much sense?
No, and plus, like, you don't have to deal with like the mental trauma per se that Mac Jones had of working with Joe Judge and Matt Patricia and Bill Belichick calling offensive plays. Like, you have a guy that literally has no attachments to that coaching staff last year, and you can just drop him in there with Bill O'Brien. And I mean, let's be honest, like Derek Carr, yeah, he can push the ball down the field, but it's not like he's not the check down Charlie guy either. You know what I mean? Like he can check it down all day if you want him to.
Yeah. I just find this whole Patriots thing fascinating this year. It'll be fun to see how that pans out. But other than that, man, I've got nothing else to talk about. Do you want to hit anything else, or do you want to wrap it up for the day?
I think that's it, man. I mean, next thing you know, the draft will be around and free agency and all that nonsense and more coaching carousels. Who's going to be these new guys, offensive coordinators? So it's going to be fun to watch.
Yes, sir. Well, let's plug it up and let's get out of here, man.
All right. So this episode of the pod and previous episodes of the Pro Football Radio podcast can be found on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere else to get your podcasts at. Be sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and you'll be notified when we have our videos scheduled to go live, and you can tune in. Also hit the notification bell, and also check out the feed for previous episodes that you might have missed. Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave a 5-star review. Google Podcasts, be sure to leave a 5-star review as well too. Social media wise, Facebook, Instagram, Pro Football Radio Podcast. Twitter at PFR Podcast. I'm on the Twitter machine, Brando_Puma, and Jay Chima, the captain of the ship on the ones and the twos, is at Jay Chima. Be sure to hit us up on social media. Follow us during the off season for any updates, and we'll talk to you next whenever there's some breaking news. Because this is the off season, but is there ever really an off season, Jay?
No, sir. The NFL season does not sleep. And because of that, we do not sleep.
Nope. Rise and grind.
See you guys next week. Peace.
Vaya con Dios.